Hello, my name is Kenney, and today we're going to be talking about biodiversity. I brought you to a little special spot here in Stanley, New Brunswick. Me and my father used to fish here. As you can see, a small stream going through it now. This whole area that we can see was once a lake that was built by beavers. And why I brought you here, we're going to talk about some different problems and crises, and one of them is hunting. The beaver population is, yes, still healthy, but of course has knocked out beautiful places to fish, like here, which I enjoyed in town. We're going to look at different things like the drivers of the biodiversity crisis, and we're going to look at why is it that animals are in danger and that we're reaching the 6th extinction. That's all coming up. Multiple threats that are attacking, and the reason for the loss in species of up to 38% by a late IPA poll to terrestrial areas, which is mainly New Brunswick, a terrestrial area. There is, of course, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species and disease, and last but not least, climate change. So you might say, well, where's the evidence? Where's the example? I can give you one. For invasive species and disease, New Brunswick used to house a beautiful animal known as the caribou that was native to this land. Because of the expanding U.S. Through the woods and the wilderness, we saw that the white-tailed deer pushed northern in towards New Brunswick. The issue with this is that there was a worm that, of course, the white-tailed deer had in their system that caribou could not be around, that eventually got into their food, into the ground that the caribou were eating off, and killed them. Meanwhile, moose were also dying off from them, but somehow evolved and now are able to live in the same area as white-tailed deer. The climate change situation is actually neat. It's a bit farther away from New Brunswick. It's actually in Newfoundland. The polar bears are moving inland because of climate change and global warming from up in the polars, up in the northern areas, and moving inland, and have been spotted in Lacine and the Fogo Islands in Newfoundland. Trust me, that would not be a good morning surprise. Good. So there's now we're at Costco. I've actually got an interesting story here. As you can see, the development of Costco just outside of New Maryland. We can see here on the outer edge is the UNB property that we'll talk about in a little bit. And basically there was an issue, and the issue was the Endangered Species Act in Canada. This is one of the examples where the government does not protect under this basically horrendous bill that they put forward to protect species and environment in Canada. Basically there's an endangered species inside, on the outside of the fence. I believe it's a tree frog and a turtle, and they are just on the other side here. There's a beaver dam, or a beaver pond, and there's lots of wildlife just on the other side of this. And you used to be able to walk for an hour or so without finding any big buildings, construction, thing like that. I remember as a kid doing that. Now you can go in there 5 minutes. You've got buildings, as you can see. Pan over this way, you can see Home Depot. It's just totally been taken over. The animals having nowhere to go but come out. Anyway, the quick story I wanted to say is that basically they had a problem, and the government said, well, there's endangered species here, so we can't let you build Costco and all these things here. So they thought they would build a fence, as you can see, and their excuse was if they built this fence, that the frogs would stay on the other side of the fence and that they wouldn't come in to where the Costco is, the Home Depot, and all these shopping centers, and basically the endangered species would not be harmed or injured. Does this look like a fence that's going to stop a frog? It's like the deer fences. They're great. They're a sense of comfort, but the deer after a while are going to realize the fence is here, realize where the end of the fence is, get around it. Just the other day I was driving along on the fence on the highway towards Stanley. And I remember my mother was saying, slow down, slow down. I said, no, we're fine. There's a deer fence. We can keep going. And there was a deer on the outside of the deer fence standing right here. So they know how to get around it. And I think what we have to realize is this is an endangered species. That means that there's limited left. And once they're gone, people. So we need the government to step up and do a better job protecting our endangered species. So next up, if we want to talk about pollution, look no further than Stu's, St. Thomas University, UNB's, and the hospital's heating source. Here it's kind of a grayish, whitish smoke coming out, sometimes way worse. Back in the old days, just as bad as coal, the central heating plant. And also, all these vehicles. I'd say there's just as much vehicles that come to campus, come to school in the summer as in the winter. In the winter it makes more sense because it's cold, but no people really walking or biking to classes. The last thing that I'd like to say is, the fact is, if Quebec stopped for 10,000 years, all pollution and all air going, of course, all pollution and all the factories just shut down, they would have to stop for 10,000 years to equal 1 year of China's pollution. So that tells you, folks, that what we need to do is we need to get together as not just certain countries having limits and caps. We have to have a world cap. We have to cap as one, as the world, to these pollution numbers.
Oh.
Hey, so I'm here at the University of New Brunswick Office of Forest Lands with Tanner Anderson, who's a resident of Charlotte County. We're going to be talking to him in a minute. Just want to say that as growing up, there is another kind of planetary boundary and a thing that connects to this situation of biodiversity, which is GDP and economics. So we're going to talk to him about, in a small town, how you have to kind of weigh the environment versus the GDP, jobs, and things like that. So first of all, hi, nice to meet you, Tanner. So what would you say is going on in Charlotte County wise of, you know, you have a lot of people, you've got to side with the fracking in a lot of places other than, you know, small towns, maybe not in Charlotte County, you know, and you're looking at the environment versus the GDP. So what's going on in Charlotte County that could be looked at as questionable as being good for the GDP but bad for the environment?
One big thing is that the Irvings have always kind of been around. Like, they're not as big as an influence as in other communities, but in my community, they bought a lot of land out towards the Penfield Ridge, that area, out towards Red Rock and that kind of area. My father used to work for them, and when they crushed rock, they had to spray the land originally. And we had an issue with there probably roughly 7 or 8 years ago. It was a vast amount of coyote population, but not a lot of deer population out in the wild. Because of all the spraying and stuff, because they were cutting down the tree, like they sprayed and then they cut, and then on all their tree plantations, just basically planting a bunch of softwood trees, cutting down all the hardwood trees that deers like to eat. Because softwood's not really good for the deer during this time of season. They usually got to dig down towards close to the ground to try to find any grass. Now there's snow on the ground, and the big thing is too is that the deer will migrate down in from like this area, like the Fredericton area. They'll migrate down into Penfield. So them cutting down all these trees, like hardwood trees and stuff that they normally feed on this time of year, like for their branches and stuff, as a replacement of softwoods, and not having as many trees around, it makes it a lot harder for them to have a go when it comes to feeding.
So one thing that's a neat fact is that Irving is taking a lot of land. They're cutting down hardwood trees, and then they're posting, we're putting, you know, billions of dollars into regrowing trees and things like this, but it's softwood. And the problem with that is softwood has 50% less H2O in them per tree.
Yeah.
So would you say, what are some projects that are going on in Charlotte County that have been in the last few years questionable for environmentalists versus people who want jobs and careers? Has there been any fracking or anything like that?
They had a push for fracking, but that never really came around the community. And especially in Charlotte County, it's they're liberal for certain things, but they're conservative for others. Jobs are very conservative of, like, it's a very hard line. Some people will say that we're bringing in too many migrants and foreign workers, because people just don't want to work these minimum wage jobs at areas that either the Irvings are doing or even at the fish plants.
And that's what I was going to say. The population in New Brunswick in 2015 was 754,300. Now is up in 2017 with the world issues and the rehousing of refugees, and it will soon be growing by a third. How are little communities like this, I mean, how are they taking in the numbers that are coming in, and are they, you know, how are they going to create jobs? What would you suggest right now with the way that...
Honestly, I'm all for people coming to the Atlantic Maritimes right now, because all the people that want more expensive jobs are going out west, but there's not really any jobs going out there, so they're coming back at the same time. But that doesn't really even matter, because probably another 10 or 15 years they'll be moving back out again when the job boom goes back out there. Or they'll pick up a trade and fucking start working here or something. And the migrant workers and like these foreigners coming in from refugees and whatnot, it's a big help to the communities, because some of those people aren't even coming back, and we need people to work the small jobs. A lot of people in my community, they just don't want to work these small jobs. They'd much rather sit there on their welfare checks and get their dope money off the government and everything else, buy a new furnace and then go sell it off, so that way they can have extra money, but it was all off welfare money at 16, 17 years old, having kids, and then they're just having them for the welfare check and the early childhood or whatever, and just feeding off them that way.
All right, well, thank you very much, Tanner. I appreciate your time. And anything else you'd like to say to the camera?
Basically, just we got to bring people in to help fight off the Irvings pretty well.
All right, thanks, Tanner. We'll talk to you later. So planetary boundaries, you may be wondering. What that is a concept of 9 Earth system processes, which have boundaries proposed in 2009 by Johan Rockstone with the Stockholm Center. So basically what it is it's taking our different things that we're doing. So we've got climate change, we've got pollution, we've got extinction, and we're putting it on a chart. Are we using more or using less than we should be, or where we are? So some were really, really, really far gone, and we have to stop immediately, and some were all right. So basically I'm going to tell you a little story. So in the beginning of time, you have a group of people, and they're told that every week they get 12 donuts from whoever, okay? And at the start of time, this group only eats about 2 donuts, 3 donuts, 4 donuts, and as time moves on, and development and everything, more people, more population, they have to eat 6, and they have to eat 8, and they have to eat 10, and then they finally eat 12. You say, okay, that's fine, that's our boundary. And then they go into overshoot because there's more people. And then they have to eat 13, 14, and they only get their limit of 12 a week. And then you see suddenly that the company's using what we had before. We're lucky that we had all this, but we are in overshoot. We are eventually going to reach till there's no more. So the bakers start having to make them smaller and smaller, the donuts smaller and smaller, and less and smaller. And then eventually there's going to be no more dough or anything left to make donuts, and they're eventually going to be out of all the materials to make food. So that's just a little easy insight on how overshoot works. So before I keep going on, I'd just like to say that with all these scientific fancy words, we're going to get back to the basics and explain. All this time we're thinking, oh, what's overshoot? What's planetary boundaries? So we're going to start with overshoot. Overshoot is basically when you are using up more than you can process, than you can build, and basically eventually it's going to run out, like fossil fuels, like trees, oxygen, things like that. Now folks, I'm going to show you a little chart here, if you can see this. So basically, as you can see here, we have the nitrogen level way out of control, phosphorus way out of control. We have freshwater use, all right. But as you can see, what we're focusing on, biodiversity. Look at the extinction rate. Wow, that's absolutely insane. And actually, there's something really crazy. And this really crazy fact that I wanted to tell you about is this, that we literally have a chart, and it is telling us this fact. Study rate reveals extinction for species in the 20th century has been up to 100 times higher than it would have been normal without human impact, and that's from The Guardian. And then you have 38% decline of population species and terrestrial habitats that I talked about earlier. So let's just go over a few quick things here at the end. Thank you for watching. A few quick facts. The population is absolutely out of control, in 2015 with 754,000 people and growing by a third by 2020. The Industrial Revolution, next time your history teacher, remember I told you, tells you how great the Industrial Revolution was. But what was it great for? It was great for jobs, it was great for the GDP, it was great for getting things done faster, but it was not good for the environment. Our politicians are not doing enough, like the situation I gave you at Costco with the Animal Species Protection Act of Canada. And like in the rock quarry, which I did my last interview on, there is very rare turtles and of course beechwood that can't be found anywhere else. And they're simply finding ways around it, little tricks, little loopholes that the government has put in place so they can get away with it. And again, another thing, next time you see Irving signs how they're building so many trees, you have to realize the trees that they're taking down have 50% more H2O in them than the trees that are being planted. And last but not least, we're going to look at the overshoot. Now, when I did the overshoot project, it suggested that if everyone in the world lived like me, we would need 3.5 planets to be sustainable. As you can see here, by country, I'm going to show you folks, by country, this is how many planets we would need, folks. Australia, 5.4. If everyone lived like Australia does, 5.4 planets. USA, 4.8. It's time to wake up. It's time to get involved and time to make sure that we can fix this issue because it is fixable. But if we keep going this way, it won't be. And a last note, I'm looking outside. It's December 10th. We got our first snowfall in New Brunswick. And meanwhile, down in Georgia, they had to cancel their yearly event, the snowball fight, because there was too much snow. When they have their snowball fight down in Georgia, I heard on the radio today, they use fake snow, but there was too much snow. So is this telling you something, folks? Huge storms of 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters of snow down in Georgia, and we're just getting our first snowstorm here in New Brunswick on December 10th. Anyway, guys, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you look into this issue because, again, it involves us. We need to make a change for the next generation. Thank you.